May 17th, 1954. After 2 years of debate, discrimination, and clash between the NAACP and the South on the laws that our country was founded upon, the decision was finally made. Racial segregation has finally come to an end. The past decades were tough for the minorities. After the endorsement of the case Plessy v. Ferguson, which stated that there will be a separation between races, but with equal treatment. Separate but equal was the phrase used to describe this. Yet that was a lie. African Americans were provided inadequate accommodations, services, and treatment. This was a time of racial inferiority. Blacks were not given the same education, same treatment in social class. Students received outdated secondhand textbooks used by whites, had less funding, and were not able to apply to higher educational institutions. This was contradictory to the original belief of separate facilities but equal. Brown versus the Board of Education, more like down with the Board of Education. Right, guys? This case began in 1951, when 13 parents filed a class action suit against the Board of Education for the city of Topeka, Kansas, to reverse its policy on racial segregation. They declared that segregation of students in public schools violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment because separate facilities are inherently unequal. After the case was finished, the enforcement of the elimination of racial segregation gave many African Americans the chance to gain a higher education and be funded and given equal materials as the white students were given, as they now were allowed to be taught together. Also, I would like to note that in the official name, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, the named plaintiff of the case was Oliver Brown, one of the 13 parents who had brought the initial dispute, because his daughter, a third grader named Linda, was forced to walk 6 blocks to her school bus stop, her school being 1 mile away, while there was a white school just 7 blocks from her house. This resulted in the parents trying to enroll their children into the nearest school, but were refused enrollment and redirected to their original segregated schools. This was when they began to file their case against the school board. The previous pictures displayed were of the 13 families and also of Oliver Brown and Linda, his daughter. This case was of huge importance to the history of our country because a result of it was the civil rights movement and us as humanity to break through discrimination and work together towards a time of peace and prosperity. A 2004 educational PBS video on this case was released, and it will give you an understanding of the current time period of when this case had occurred. I would like to show you a clip from the video, which is 5 minutes long.
By the early 50s, segregation was frayed by the war and torn in spots where the court had acted. The white primary was outlawed. Housing covenants outlawed. Some graduate and law schools were forced to admit blacks. But the court was aware that the big fight was still to come. The schools, K through 12, white children and black in the same classroom.
Southerners assumed that if grade school kids were in a desegregated setting, they'd get to know each other and they'd get to date each other and then they'd marry to each other. And that was the strongest taboo that the South held.
Hopefully that has given you a good understanding of that time period. I would also like to show my own trailer for a non-existent documentary that I have created on this case.
The Supreme Court decision of 1954 was for me the Magna Carta. It was the second emancipation. It was a great moment.
I'll just keep doing this until that's enough. Nisha. Okay, that was a weird coincidence. I swear to God, that wasn't on purpose. Okay, so I was gonna copy that second. Not do the other side, just like. Hey, John. Yeah? Give me a funny joke that'll give me an A. Okay. Oh, nothing cracked. Okay, I see a problem in our plan.
Yeah, struck a take.